Krishna to Arjuna, he says these are the only two things that are worth knowing, that gives you divine knowledge. One is what is the Kshetrajna, what is the pure consciousness, which illumines the limited consciousness or the Jivatma and the whole universe around us, which is known as Kshetra. Kshetra literally means, as I explained in the previous class, it is the field of action, the world that we see, the world that we interact with. So all these things you will find becomes very clear to us, the goal of spiritual life, why we should align ourselves with the Kshetrajna, the pure consciousness, which will liberate us from our individual existence, which is very often painful because we are part of the whole. And as long as we identify ourselves with the whole, we will always feel incomplete, unfulfilled. There will be misery. So, the whole philosophy of reaching the ultimate goal of life, which is Sat, Chit, and Ananda, pure existence, undivided existence. Sat, Chit is the pure consciousness, which is unified, which is not divided. Apparently, it is divided till divine knowledge shows that it is the same consciousness that is pervading all these things that we see around us. And then Ananda, the bliss which you get when you identify with this Paramatma. All this goal of life only will resolve our miseries. So the more you identify with the Kshetra, that is Prakriti, and the more you identify with the gross Prakriti, the grosser you are, the more miserable you are. That's the essence of Vedanta. And the only way that you can realize yourself as the Paramatma is through the divine knowledge. And that divine knowledge, intellectually at least, is facilitated by the study of Kshetrajna Yoga. So this is the first step. This is the intellectual understanding of what life is all about. It's not an experience, mind you. There's a huge difference. So you might understand everything what is mentioned in this chapter and yet have no experience of that Kshetrajna. But at least it will show you the path to that goal. So the only purpose this chapter or a study of this chapter will serve is to clarify all the ideas, the concepts, at least the theoretical part, so that you may be motivated to experience that truth. So that is why Swami Vivekananda says in his Raj Yoga, whether there is a God or not, unless you experience it yourself. If there is a God, you should experience him. If you say there is a Paramatma, you should experience him. Experience that reality. Now, means and ways may be different, but the experience is the same. So here in the 13th chapter, unlike in the 12th chapter, 11th chapter, 10th chapter, and all the previous chapters where there are different yogas, yogas are the technology or the means or the methodology of how to attain or how to get that experience, which the intellectual knowledge is known to you, but to experience it, you need yoga. So that is why Gita is both the Upanishad as well as yoga. Upanishad is knowledge, and yoga, that is why each chapter is known as a yoga. Yoga helps you to bridge the distance between the essence of the Upanishads and your present experience. So we may be very clear in our ideas. We may be very great Upanishadic scholars, which is uh, summarized in the Bhagavad Gita. And we may know everything that Vedanta, Sankhya, and all the philosophies point towards to. But unless we reach that Kshetrajna and understand it intuitively or become one with it, our knowledge remains incomplete. So that's why in the third verse, first two verses we discussed, it says, Sri Krishna says, He says, Tat kshetram, that kshetra, yatcha yad yadrikcha, yad vikari yatascha yat, sacha yo yat prabhavascha, tat samasena me shrunu. Here briefly from samasena means in brief. He's not going to give a big sermon. Mostly most of these avatars and prophets and great teachers of the world, they use very few words because truth is really simple. It is only because we do not understand it, it becomes complex. Our upbringing is such. We begin with simple truths. A child, perhaps, if he is told certain truths, if you know that famous story of Madalasa, the Queen Madalasa, who used to, right from the cradle, give these wonderful thoughts, telling you are Niranjana, you are pure, you are absolute. You are Sachidananda, you are all the Upanishadic truths were given to the child. And as soon as the child grew up, the son, right from cradle, he has been hearing it, hearing the truth. And as soon as he grew up and he became a young man, he just left the world in to seek to realize the truth that was dinned into his ears. For years and years together, the queen was telling this child, the first child, who was supposed to be the king, but he became so engrossed with this wonderful philosophy that he didn't wait. He just left the world and became a monk, trying to realize what he heard from his mother since childhood. So that is a very rare case. In our case, what happens is that we are told what we are really not. And the child is sort of hypnotized. That is why when some Westerners who are not used to this kind of thinking told Vivekananda, you are hypnotizing us. He says, no, I'm not hypnotizing you, I'm de-hypnotizing you. The world has hypnotized you. The world, right from your parents, your teachers, and all your peers and classmates, friends, everybody has hypnotized you, telling you either you are this, you are that. They have given you more and more upadhis or limited identities, telling you you are short, you are intelligent, you are foolish, or you look good, and so many adjectives have been attributed. And hearing those things, you really have believed them, and you have been hypnotized into what you are not. So that is the great truth Sri Krishna is telling, that the Kshetrajna or the knower of the Kshetra has been convinced by Prakriti, by Maya or whatever you name you call it. Prakriti takes you away from Purusha or takes you away from the Kshetrajna, gets you involved in Kshetra, and when you really are confused as to what your real identity is as a jivatma, that it leads to frustration, that leads to lack of direction, lack of fulfillment, misery. So Buddha and every prophet says it is the lack of knowledge of our true nature. Vedanta also says in a very powerful way that this lack of knowledge of our true nature leads to misery and all the evils that we are faced with. But that doesn't mean that once your whole goal in life should be to know the kshetrajna, or the pure consciousness behind the kshetra. You should know the nature of kshetra also. You should know how Prakriti has trapped you, how you have been hypnotized. So that is why Swami Vivekananda says it'll take a lot of time to dehypnotize yourself. The world has been hypnotizing you, telling you you are belong to this race, that race, superiority, inferiority complexes. All these things were not there with the child. When the child, uh, Swami Vivekananda says in his Jnana Yoga, in one of the lectures he delivered in London, he says that the child is born with that intuition. Intuitively, it is at peace with itself. But society robs him of his innocence and joy and all these things. And spirituality is an attempt to regain that lost innocence. So that's why Jesus said, unless you be like those little children, you will not enter the kingdom of heaven. What he meant was the society has hypnotized you, in the words of Vivekananda, and the process of sadhana or upasana or this Gita, where the distinction between kshetra and kshetragna has been explained, will lead you back to that primal original state where you regain that innocence. To regain that innocence which you already possessed and which Swamiji uses very harsh words. He says society has robbed you of that innocence. So unfortunately, society doesn't help us. The world does not help us to understand who we really are. So Gita comes to the rescue and Krishna says to Arjuna, hear briefly from me what the kshetra is. Because you are caught in the kshetra, you are part of the kshetra, at least you have been made to believe that you are part of the kshetra or the world, then you should know what its properties are. How do you recognize how to come out of it? You are in deep mess, that is okay. But you have to find out a way out by knowing the nature, by knowing how you first in the first place entered into it. So what its properties are, you should know. The question may arise if the goal is to know the Kshetragni or the pure consciousness, pure Brahman or God, then why should you know anything about the world? Sri Krishna says, no. You have to hear briefly from me what this Kshetra is, what its properties are. Yadrikcha means what is it like, what are its modifications, and who it really is, what Kshetra is, and what his powers are. What are the powers of the Kshetra? Its powers. You cannot say his powers because there is no gender in this Purusha or Prakriti. Though for convenience, we say Purusha is masculine gender, we use the masculine gender. Prakriti is always addressed in the feminine because that Prakriti's role is to create. So that's why it's known as feminine. We use the feminine gender, but ultimately it is better to call it as it. So he says, whatever you have to know, whatever secular knowledge or spiritual knowledge you have to gain in this world, to live in this world and also to get out of this misery of the world, for both you have to have knowledge of this Kshetra and Kshetragna. If you have the knowledge of Kshetra, you develop all the sciences, physical sciences, psychological sciences, and whatever we study and try hoping for some kind of smooth passage or in when we are dealing with this world in relationship to ourselves, our own uh, interaction with the world, and how we can make ourselves happy when we are in the kshetra. For that, you need to know the knowledge, the properties of the kshetra, what its modifications are, and what its powers are, what it can do to you, and what it can do to release you from the grip. So, Vedas and all the Vedanta philosophy don't just talk of the Kshetragna, just Brahman. Many people say, I mean, especially Advait Vedantin, they said, why should you bother about Maya? Once you know there is Maya or there is Prakriti, just ignore and just focus on Brahman. But that is a very difficult path because we are so much attached to this world. So Gita gives a much simpler way. Though Advaita also is spoken of, but other paths are there, more gradual, because our dehypnotization will take a lot of time. We have been so much hypnotized that if somebody tells you that you are not this, you will not believe unless you experience that you are far greater than what you really think you are and what the world thinks you are or what the world convinces you that you are. So all these badges or the labels that the world gives you and you give yourself are temporary things. They are hypnotizations, according to Swami Vivekananda. So he says, I have not come to hypnotize you. I have come to de-hypnotize you. That's what he told when some people in the West thought, what is this person talking about? He was just talking pure Vedanta, but unfortunately, Vedanta is not very uh, sought after because of our ignorance and because of our desire to remain hypnotized. We are very happy where we are. So even to deal with the kshetra, you need the knowledge of the kshetra, kshetra and prakriti. So that is why Arjuna, he says there are two. Uh, all the inquiry in Vedanta is not just about kshetrajna, but it is the inquiry into kshetra and kshetrajna constitute the entire inquiry process, whether it is pure sciences, whether it is applied sciences, whether it is philosophy, whether it is applied philosophy, which is known as yoga. All these subjects are covered by these two realities. So it is very necessary. All the branches of knowledge that are revealed so far and that are going to be revealed in future, new branches are coming. 100 years ago, the what we thought is physical science is changing. New discoveries in physical sciences are there. So also Sri Ramakrishna says, never put an end to the spiritual experiences. Spiritual knowledge also changes in the sense there are different pathways, different methods, different yogas. So as many minds, so many yogas will be discovered. That is the idea. We can broadly classify them into four yogas, but Swamiji says, and Sri Ramakrishna also says, based on his master's teaching, never put a full stop. He says, God's book is not a closed book. You cannot say my prophet or my scripture it gives the ultimate truth. There's no other scripture. We will not accept any other scripture after that. That is against the philosophy of Sri Ramakrishna. He said, as long as I live, so long do I learn. I learn both secular knowledge, kshetra, knowledge of the kshetra, and I also learn the knowledge of the kshetrajna, how to reach the goal through different paths. every age, knowledge is increasing. Just secular knowledge is increasing. What was considered to be classical physics changes when somebody else comes with a better explanation of the same physics. You call it quantum physics, you go deeper, you give a better explanation to the micro phenomena. The macrocosm, it may work in a particular way, but as you go deeper, even in physical sciences and so, life sciences, medical sciences, you find there is more and more, more and more branches of knowledge are revealed. So he says not only the branches of knowledge that are revealed till now, but branches that will be revealed in future, new branches. But they can be broadly divided into two, depending on what you are inquiring. If you are inquiring kshetra, it is known as secular knowledge or the knowledge of the world. And if it is sacred knowledge, which is super sensuous knowledge, then it is known as knowledge of the kshetrajna. So depending on what you are interested in, Sri Krishna says both are necessary. So I'll give you a brief idea. That is what he says. All of them, all of the people in the world, or all scriptures of the world, or all books of the world, I'll not say scriptures, because for secular knowledge, for them the scripture is the discoveries and the books that are written by great scientists. For them, that is the scripture. So for spiritual science, there is another scripture which teaches you about the kshetrajna. And there are certain scriptures which deal only with the kshetra, physical sciences and other allied sciences. But there are some books which discuss both. They say complete knowledge is the knowledge of both kshetra and kshetrajna. How it is separated, how these two knowledges, knowledge systems, knowledge paradigms are separated and what are the vehicles of this revelation. For example, if you want to learn something about astronomy, you need telescopes, better and better telescopes. So you need certain vehicles or instruments of this revelation. If you want microorganisms and all, you need microscopes. To do experiments, you need different instruments, which are the vehicles of revelation. Each instrument or each technique reveals a different truth, depending on what you want to discover. If you want to discover chemistry, you need certain other instruments, the various ways of discovering. So knowledge is increasing. Now, what are the different vehicles that give us revelation of both Kshetra and Kshetrajna? So people are either engaged in Kshetra, Prakriti, or Kshetrajna, or some want to discuss both. They want to make a comparative study. Like there are books written on modern physics and Vedanta, modern physics and Sankhya. Attempts have been made because they want unification of knowledge. Just as the unified field theory, so many attempts were made and better and better explanations are given. People are not satisfied by saying there are so many different fields or different energies. They want one single energy which can explain all the energies, all gravitation, magnetic energy, all the other energies that we see or perceive in the universe, light energy. So is there something common which can unify all these energies and give a unified explanation? So also in spirituality, all the different aspects of human personality, human perception, eyes, the sense organs, the buddhi, the manas, the reactive mind, everything was studied by psychologists to find out if there is some unified existence which can subsume all these things. So that is why this verse now, where Sri Krishna is trying to explain spiritual knowledge, that is, now he is more concerned about, primarily is concerned, I mean, the rishis and the scripture, the people who wrote the scriptures, they are interested in both spiritual as well as secular, though they will not neglect the secular because they know how to take the step and go from gross to the subtle and beyond the subtle, that is, go to the pure consciousness. So he says, Rishibhir Bahuda Geetam, Chandobhir Vividhai Pruthak, Brahma Sutra Padaschaiva Hetu Madbhir Vinishchitaihi. Means he says, Rishibhi, by rishis, all the rishis have tried in their own way to discuss both about Kshetra and Kshatrajna, and they have sung Geetam, they have sung. Most of our scriptures were chanted because if it is in the form of song, it is easy to remember. You see, the Ramayana, the Mahabharata, and all the shlokas, they have some rhythm, they have some chanda. Chandas means meter. The reason being is if something is composed in poetry form or song form, then that is why Gita is also a great song. It follows the Anushtup Chanda, a particular rhyme. So you can memorize easily. If it is a big prose passage in prose, the first prose that was introduced in spirituality was Shankaracharya, who wrote the Bhashyas. He had to use prose because we speak in prose. We never speak in poetry. Though there may be some people who always like to be poetic in when they talk to each other, but it is very rare. Poetry is supposed to be an intellectual pursuit. But for Bhagavad Gita, for Upanishads, they are all poetry because the rishis believed that this knowledge, because there was no, you should remember that though India discovered writing, writing was not used. It's one of the least preferred method of communication because once you put anything in writing, now the whole world is publishing papers, writing books, reading books. It was never used. That is why all our knowledge is known as Shruti, that which is heard. So the means of communication was always sound, which is much more effective Not that they did not know writing, they did not want to put anything on for two reasons. One is whatever you put on palm leaf or whatever they used, it could be destroyed. But if you remember, then it will be internalized. You will give it to the next generation. In fact, when Swami Vivekananda visited Porbandar in Gujarat, he he met Shankar Pandurang Pandit, who was a great scholar and administrator, translator. So he had called Pandits, he was trying to make a critical edition of the Atharva Veda. So he brought several Pandits from all over India, from north, from south. He wanted to compare. And all of them could recite all the Vedas through memory, especially Atharva Veda. So they could recite from memory. The only way you transmitted knowledge was through Shravana, by hearing and by repeating verbally. Because that makes the knowledge foolproof. We could write the mantra, but the mantra is repeated audibly because that becomes part of the psyche. When you write, it just leaves you. It is on the paper, it is in books. There may be a lot of knowledge in the computers and the books. They may be useful for reference, but we do not, we can't say we possess this knowledge. So that's why they created this rishis through distinctive chants. Vividhaye prathak chandobi. Chandobi means through verses. Is emphasizing, because if it is verses, the Bhagavad Gita, Ramayana, for example, it's beautiful. Valmiki is a poet. So the whole Ramayana is in poetry form. So also the Mahabharata. All the epics, all the Sanskrit verses that you get in the Vedas, they are all chanda, they are in chanda. There may be different chandas, so that you can, chanda means meter. How? Because if if you want to repeat something in a sequence, it helps if you rhyme it. It is known as rhyme. In poetry, it is so easy. Why do we remember songs than the dialogues? We don't remember most of the songs. Even child, young children remember all the songs that you hear. One is because of music, and second is because they the songs are normally appearing to us or given to us in rhyme. So it is easy to remember poetry. That is why through chandobhi in chants, vividai, distinctive, Brahma Sutra padai, Brahma Sutra also. There is another memory technique that was used. First is using chanda or poetry. They made sure the rishis wanted to convince the people that whatever you memorize, that is yours. Whatever you write down is not yours, it is in the book. When you open it, when you read it, it is yours. You may just forget it. But if you memorize it, so much of importance was given to Shravana, to hear and then memorize. And after that, they will be allowed in the class. In fact, if you don't memorize, you will not be allowed inside. The books were not allowed. I was wondering why this Shravana Manana Nidhi Shruti, always knowledge of scriptures was known as Shruti, that which is heard. Shruta, that which is heard. So here he says, whatever you hear, because that was the main medium of instruction. Unfortunately, after the British came and maybe calligraphy came much earlier, the Arabs also, the Chinese also brought some calligraphy to India. Slowly, writing became popular and now it has totally replaced. Maybe the oral tradition is coming back, but still, writing dominates the whole world now because secular knowledge is fine with writing because it's not such a serious thing. Whereas the spiritual knowledge, it was always sung by rishis. That's why he says, Rishi vi Bahuda Geetam. They song. Bhagavad Gita is also a song, the celestial song, they say. Chando being chants, various, though different. Then Brahma Sutra Padai, Brahma Sutras, the second system of remembering was, even this poetry was difficult to memorize. 1,001 lakh verses, 100,000 verses in Mahabharata. How could you remember? But the essence was less. The essence of what really needs to be known was given in the form of sutras. Sutra means they also have to be memorized. Panini's Vyakarana Sutras. Without that, Grammar, you have to learn all the Panini Sutras before studying grammar. First, memorize them, whether you know the meaning or not. Similarly, Brahma Sutras. Then we have Yoga Sutras, Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. So everything was compressed so that in 700 verses of the Bhagavad Gita, you get the whole philosophy. Some Brahma Sutras, they are still brief, but you need a teacher to explain. Once it is explained, you remember the sutra, it is there. And then when the tantras came, they said even the sutras are superfluous. If you want to realize reality, if you want to realize the ultimate goal of life, then you go to a smaller unit that is known as mantra, which contains the essence of the scriptures. Om is one mantra. There are bija mantras they discovered. So Tantras went a step further, trying to simplify all the Upanishads. That is why Sri Ramakrishna said, all the Vedas merge into the Gayatri mantra, Gayatri. Gayatri merges into Om. So that is how our ancestors or the rishis, though they sung in various ways, they always try to make it brief and brief. And that is, he says, Brahma Sutra Padai, the apt words indicative of Brahman, that is the essence. Cha Hetu, full of reasoning and decisive. It is full of reasoning. It's not just some poetry, imaginative poetry, or imaginative stories like you have Harry Potter and all those things. There are different types of myths. Some myths lead to the knowledge of Brahman. Even Bhagavata, if people think the Chandi and all the war and all, they're not novels. If you read, everything finally points to Brahman, and there's a lot of reasoning and convincing which Sri Krishna does in the Bhagavad Gita. So that is why he says the sages or the rishis, though they focused on spiritual knowledge, it was not that they did not give any importance to secular knowledge, like medicine. Charaka was there, then there were so many scientists, astronomers, philosophers, not only philosophers, but astronomers, and so many subjects of knowledge. Alchemists who could find out the properties of metals and other things, how much of discovery was there. But they gave preference to the spiritual knowledge because they found that is more important, whereas the other knowledge will enable you to survive in this world in a better way. But beyond that, you have to have the paravidya. Aparavidya is okay, but they utilize these sciences and arts for the revelation of the truth, and it remains unaffected by the passage of time. You see, these eternal truths which they discovered. For example, even if Newton has gone away, maybe in certain system Newton's law of motion may not work. But in the gross universe, the law of gravitation, whatever he discovered, in the system that it is used, it is even today practical. Whether he was an Englishman or discovered, it's true for everyone. So they are not affected by the passage of time. All these laws, even secular laws, are eternal laws. Spiritual laws are also eternal. So that is how truth does not lose its validity or importance because it is clothed in simple language. You see, sometimes we think that somebody who explains things in a very complicated way is great. For example, if you read Aurobindo, the simple truths which he explains, whether it is truths that were expressed by Buddha, Christ, the greater the person, the simpler the truths become. They convey through few sentences, cryptic sentences, things which scholars have to expand. And sometimes it is so confusing that they get lost in the flowery language. That is why Shankaracharya, when people started becoming scholars, he said, Bhaja Govindam, Govindam, Bhaja Moodamate. You people are just going after grammar and learning these big books and going on increasing your knowledge. Don't waste your time. Go to the essence of the scripture. That is worship Govinda. That is worship the Lord, the essence. All these Upanishads, all the Gita, all the commentary that he wrote was to point to this Brahman. And giving up Brahman, if you are going after other things, it that imperfect language will not hide truth. Truth is truth, whether you express it, but only thing is it requires a genius to express the same truth in few words, few sentences. Like there is Sermon on the Mount. If you see the Bible, there are so many things which you will not understand. But if you go to the original truths, that is the greatest truths which Jesus uttered, they are very simple. Not only simple, they are direct. But only thing is, we want complex things. But rishis have taken care to expound these things in a very refined language, because language was a very important medium. That is why many of the Sanskrit words cannot be translated into English. English language was meant for secular knowledge. It was not meant for spiritual knowledge. The biblical language, no matter how much you try to translate, the original meaning will be lost in the translation. So also Sanskrit was such a precise language that and it was augmented. They added music to it to make it more powerful. That is why these chants, some people ask, why should we uh, recite these stotras and chants regularly? That is because when thoughts are clothed in music, it enhances its value, provided you know the meaning, of course. If you just memorize it for the sake of music, then you lose the essence. That is why many musicians miss the essence. When they sing this, they don't even give importance to the words that are there and the meaning. So every time you sing something, sing the Bhagavad Gita or sing other Upanishad verses, you should understand the meaning should immediately strike you. So music is used to augment the already uh, wonderful poetry which is there. If you have a good voice and good music, it will enhance. But the essence has to be understood. Accurate language has to be used. That is why they are so careful. Kshetra, Kshetrajna, all these terms, Sri Krishna will not use uh, simple words. He will use words which are so deep in meaning. So you have to understand, and it not only appeals to the intellect, but it touches the heart. So music touches the heart, or the chanting or the poetry touches the heart, and emotion is also refined through music. But at the same time, the intellect is sharpened through reasoning. So both these instruments of the of expressing the divine message, music as well as the poetry or as well as the thoughts, they convey the divine uh, message. So reason was never sacrificed. Swami Vivekananda said that some people become so emotional that they don't use reason. Reason is like a street cleaner. It removes all the superstitions, and then you apply emotion, that is jnana mishrita bhakti. So bhakti is refined emotion. When it applied to refined jnana knowledge, it becomes the thing becomes more clear. So a balanced personality is one in whom both emotions and thoughts, that is love, that is bhakti, and knowledge are harmonized. That is why he says the sages sang whatever is to be known, Kshetra and Kshetrajna, these people have explained through Chandas, through Brahma Sutras, the knowledge through Brahma Sutras, and also uh, the music and the poetry behind it. So, Sri Krishna says one of the greatest preachers in Hindu myth, we have a character of Narada. Narada never gave talks, he sang. He's always seen with a veena or some instrument, and he's always moving, singing. That tradition was there in Bengal also, where they are known as bauls. There's so many traditions where singing, through singing, these village people, though they were illiterate, They could not read and write, but that doesn't. Uh, that's why reading and writing was not given so much importance. Now we talk of literacy, literacy, literacy. It is nothing compared to the oral tradition that we had. People think that India was illiterate or maybe uh, but Sri Ramakrishna himself came as an illiterate person. Swami Vivekananda explains that. He says Vivekananda came as an illiterate person. Illiterate means one who does not know to read and write. Of course, he could read and write basic things, but he was not a scholar as such. He says it was a university graduate who could explain why Sri Ramakrishna incarnated as an illiterate person. He mentions this. He shows that he came to demonstrate the fact that literacy has nothing to do with spiritual realization. And he came to show to the world that in the exalted mind of a pure soul, through sadhana, through upasana, one can know the highest truths and attain the highest knowledge without having to read and write. So, though he did not know, and that's why he says he deliberately discarded literacy or discarded intellectual knowledge. I mean, not intellectual knowledge, they are discarded literacy. So, he came just to demonstrate that. And in the tradition of the rishis, somebody asked, you quote so many things. You quote from Bhagavata, you quote from this Purana, that Purana. How do you never read any book? We don't see any books in your room, except for a few books which he used to ask others to read. He would not read them and he would hear. But he said, I may not have read, but do you know how much I have heard since childhood? Because that unfortunately, that was the transition phase when reading and writing replaced the oral tradition. That was the greatest challenge that, and Ramakrishna took up that challenge and he said this very system which was introduced by Macaulay in 1836 to destroy Indian culture, because somehow they felt that by introducing reading and writing and converting our education system into an examination system, which it has been reduced to now, we will destroy whatever is Indian, whatever is vital in Indian Indian tradition, spiritual tradition. So Macaulay found that once we replace this method of oral tradition with this tradition of exams and reading and writing, and the younger generation will totally forget the oral tradition and the wonderful ideas, then it will lose its vitality. And that's what is happening now. Recently, there was a seminar where some of the management people from India, IIM Kozhikode, and other places, they came saying that we have to globalize Indian thought. I said, before you want to globalize Indian thought, you please try to Indianize Indian thought. Indians need Indian thought more than the world needs. World will find out somehow or the other if there is some wonderful truths. The Western world is capable of discovering it, and they are doing it. But unfortunately, Indians uh, have to be Indianized first. That means they have to go back to their roots, find out what made them great, what made them stand out in world civilization. So don't, I said, it would be foolish for Indians who are not Indianized enough to globalize the Indian culture. Globalization will happen automatically, just as Newton's laws and all the physics, they became global without Newton having to go there. These thoughts, once they spread like wildfire. They spread everywhere. The political systems, the Roman contribution, the Greek contribution, Aristotle, and all those scientific terminology, they never went to preach. This knowledge by itself, if there is truth, if there is vitality in secular or spiritual knowledge, it will become global. Nobody can stop it. Just as yoga has become global, Vedanta will become global if there is vitality, provided the people who become the vehicles of transmitting this, they first have to understand. So Narada, Sri Ramakrishna says, Narada was endowed with a not only a very rational and penetrating intellect, but he was emotionally balanced also, all absorbing divine love. He was full of bhakti but full of jnana also. So devotees have to, Sri Ramakrishna says, evolve after that pattern. That is why Sri Krishna discusses after Sankhya Yoga, Dhyana Yoga, he comes to Bhakti Yoga, and before that he Vishwarupa Darshana, the divine aspects which will make you understand the greatness of the Lord, and then you feel that one should focus on these aspects through bhakti, through love, not only through intellect but also through emotion. But then he knows that after having attained all the knowledge of the 12 chapters, in the 13th chapter he goes back to the fundamentals just to clear Arjuna's ideas so that he doesn't become just an emotional bhakta. A bhakta will be very emotional, but if he sacrifices reason, that is not good. So now we will tell him what is kshetra. The verse 5th and 6th, which we'll discuss today, we'll just introduce and then take it up in the next class. He introduced the concept of kshetra. Without knowing what Prakriti is, you cannot discuss about Purusha. So first he tells, where are you now? You have to start from where you are now. If you discuss about Brahman, which is very far from attainment right now, then what is the use? I may go on talking of God and I'm go on talking of consciousness, pure consciousness, which are abstract terms now. They are not matters of our experience. What is a matter of our experience is this world. This world which is so real to us that we cannot even dream of giving up this world. At least uh, partly detaching ourselves from the world. Nobody wants. They want this world because it is so interesting, it's so uh, uh, it attracts so attractive. So there's no question. So you know what the kshetra is. If you know what it is, then perhaps you will have some kind of detachment. If somebody tells you that the money that you earn is not going to be, everybody knows that, but if somebody keeps on reminding, whether you earn 1 billion or 10 billion, everything will be left behind. Whereas Gita, Sri Krishna says, when Arjuna asked, similarly, he was thinking of property, kingdoms, and all these things. And he knows that the day, when he dies, maybe his sons will inherit it, but at least he will not be able to take anything that he earns. So he thought, all this effort I put to conquer these kingdoms and all, ultimately on my death, even the great Alexander was left. There's a famous story where he was just holding some dust and he says, this is all I'm taking with me to my grave after conquering so many kingdoms. So also he felt, after doing all the sadhana, suppose I die, where will my spiritual attainment, spiritual wealth that I accumulated, will it go? Then Sri Krishna tells him, no, 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 don't compare these two things. All the material things will be left behind. You can't take it to your next life. Whereas all the spiritual attainments, because of their subtle nature, because of their non-gross nature, they will be carried over and you can begin from where you left. So it's like there was somewhere I heard that some people tried to fool, they said you who believed in rebirth, they said you deposit all your money and in the next birth, wherever you are born, we will train you in such a way that you can recollect your past and you can reclaim. That's ridiculous. It will never happen. But attempts have been made. They're so much attached to their property. They're just confused now. In 5 years, maybe I'll die. So will I be able to enjoy that after I'm born maybe in some other country and somehow I prove? So somebody said we will try to have a bank which will give you, but I don't think it is ever possible because how can you prove who you were in the previous birth and who's going to give you? Maybe all the robbers and all your descendants, undeserving people will take away all your wealth. But it's not so. If a person is spiritual, whatever spirituality has attained, if he dies tomorrow, all that will be carried over till he gets a suitable birth. suitable body to work out his karma, and he will begin from where he lost. That's why we find some people who are not devoted, they do not have anything significant in the first phase of their life. Suddenly there is a transformation. How can it be a person who has not been, it's like somebody who has not even gone to school suddenly does PhD. It's not possible in secular knowledge, it's not possible in the world. But in spirituality, it is possible because he has inherited that. Somewhere it was waiting to be manifest, it was hidden, it was in potential form. And the moment they get the right person, the right method, the right yoga, they suddenly become spiritual. Overnight transformation, like Tulsidas, for example. These are two wonderful examples. And Valmiki himself, who was a robber, by no means anybody would have even imagined that this robber would become, this murderer would become a great saint, Valmiki. And that did not happen gradually. It's an overnight transformation. So something was there, something which he had done in the past life was carried over to the next life. So that is the advantage. So here, constituents of Kshetra, I'll just read why fifth verse and sixth verse, Sri Krishna is trying to tell what are the constituents of Kshetra, know that, know its properties, know everything, then you will understand whether you should follow it or not. He's not asking you give up the world. He said, this is Kshetra, this is Kshetragna. Now you choose what you want. He is not even telling Arjuna what to do. Mahabhutanya Hankaro. Now, first know what it is. Then you decide whether you, just like when you go to the market, you want to buy something, you just see the properties, how much fat is there, how much carbohydrate. You have to choose. So now I'll tell you what this Kshetra is. Mahabhutani, the great elements that you see, that is Prithvi up, that is water, Vayu, Agni, and all those things. So the great elements, they are known as the great elements. Mahabhutani, Ahankara, egoism, that is another constituent of Kshetra. You are in Prakriti because of your ego. If there is no ego, you will be Purusha. Purusha has no ego, it is a universal consciousness. But that limited consciousness, that limited ego, then the great elements which are seen outside and in your own body, egoism, ahankara, buddhi, intellect, which is refined mind. When the mind is refined, when it can make right choices, it can understand what is good, what is bad, then it is known as buddhi. Manas is just reactive. You say something and you reply something. It's just a mechanical process, subtle mechanical, mechanical instrument which enables you to interact with the world. So manas or mind, what we normally call the mind, is a reactive mind. It can just react. It can be happy, it can be sorrowful, it can be good, it can be jealous, it can be noble. Many things happen. But intellect tells you what is good, what is bad, what will lead to goodness, what will lead. So buddhi has to be awakened. So buddhi is separate. Avyaktam, they are the unmanifested. Evacha, what is unmanifested? You don't know. They are in potential form. All this, evacha, indriyani, the sense organs, the eyes, ears, nose, and all those things through which, and dasha, 10 indriyas. Normally there are five karmendriyas and five gyanendriyas. Karmendriya is through which you act. So there are five organs of action, five organs of knowledge. Gyanendriya, that which helps you to perceive the world you see outside. That is the great elements outside. Ekam, dasha, ekam cha and pancha. That means it is not only the two the great elements, that is egoism, intellect, also the unmanifested, avyakta, the 10 senses, and the one mind. Mind is always one. Though mind is one because it is that mind which coordinates all the indriyas, the inputs given by Gyanendriya, and gives it to the Karmendriya. So the reactive mind is only one. You don't have two minds. Though one may think that one can multitask. You can see, you can hear, so many things you do simultaneously, but no. You do one thing at a time, but very fast. You see one thing, you hear one thing, you simultaneously, but because the distance, because the interval is so in microsecond that you think you are simultaneously hearing and seeing. Mind can be attached, that is the secret of meditation. Mind can be attached to only one sense organ at a time. So the 10 senses and one mind. You imagine how much strain and stress the mind has because the senses are constantly giving it input. That is why they say when you meditate, at least close the two senses. One is eyes. Why do you close your eyes? We are not fools to close our eyes. We close because we want to stop disturbance through the eyes. And then we try to go to a silent place. We don't meditate in a marketplace. We shut off, at least two indriyas are less. And then the mind can calm down because the more the inputs, the more confused you are. So five objects of the senses: sight, smell. So if all of them are bombing the mind, that's one mind. Poor mind cannot cannot be under control. So buddhi also fails to control that mind. Now the second verse says, uh, इच्छा द्वेष सुखम दुखम संगात संगातः चेतना धृतिः एतत् क्षेत्रम समासेन savikaram udaritam. Now first are this gave a list, he gives a list, the great elements, that is the mahabhutas with which you are interacting, gross, solid, liquid, everything that is outside, egoism, and not only outside but also inside in our body. Egoism, that is ahankara, intellect, buddhi, as also the unmanifest, that is the karana sharira, which you don't know what is there in potential form inside of you. The 10 senses which are either working fully, or if a person is blind, his one sense is not working. So 9. But still, the 10 senses, one mind, and 5 objects of the senses. So objects of taste is different, objects of sight, they are all 5 corresponding objects which are in touch with the sense organs. They give reality to this kshetra. This is kshetra. Now, what happens when you come in touch with this? There are certain reactions. One is desire. If you see something, you desire it, or you hate it. If you don't like it, you won't desire it, you'll hate it. Raga and dvesha. Raga, that is desire, which comes from desire to possess. Anuraga. Raga means I like something, I want it. Hatred is I don't like something, that's why I hate it. I am running away from it. So it is known as dvesha. Then pleasure, pain. Pleasure means sukha. It's uh, it is pleasure, pain, and the aggregate, the sum total of all these things. The aggregate means sangata. When all these things come together, there is a feeling of some kind of aggregate. So that is what it is meant here. Sangatha, Sanghata, sorry, not Sangatha, Sanghata. Sanghata means when you interact with this, when you interact with music, when you interact with some object of taste, so many things come in contact with the senses, and that aggregate is known as Sanghata. Chetana, that is intelligence. Dhriti, fortitude. Fortitude means some kind of firmness. You see, without this firmness, you will be carried away by the kshetra. Firmness, fortitude is, suppose you decide, I'll not eat this sweet. In normal case, the animal will just see and just grab it. But your fortitude will tell you, that firmness will tell you, no, I should not eat it. So that is also a quality of the mind, to choose what to eat, what not to eat. It's not just buddhi. Buddhi tells you what not to eat, what not. The firmness comes out of willpower. So willpower tells you whether intelligence may tell you this is bad, but if there is no firmness, you will just go and eat it. But intelligence will tell you something, but you need firmness. So that is known as dhriti. So dharana, dhriti, is the dhriti word means that which holds, that which gives you firmness. So that is why Kshetra has been thus briefly described with its modifications. So we will just conclude now with this for 6 verses what these things are, because we have to discuss in detail how the Kshetra has been described in this very brief manner. Kshetra is much more complicated, but our Indians had the knack of reducing everything to the basics. So there are 5 senses. That is the greatest discovery they made. Only 5 senses. Inputs can be only 5. Out of that, if you are dumb or deaf or blind, then you lose 2 senses. You have only other senses to communicate. Sometimes you may not be able to even feel the touch. So there are so many sense organs which interact with the senses. There is sangata, there is communication with these two, and that is how you see the world. If there is no sense organ, there is no uh, the elements may be there, but you are least affected by that. So a blind person, even if something wonderful is going on, if he is blind, he cannot see. So there is no sangatha, there is no aggregate. So this aggregates what it is, how things happen, how we perceive things, how we interact, and how we get deluded, and how we get desires, and how we get, as he says, the other 2 things, fortitude, ichcha, dvesha, sukha, dukkha, all these things, Sri Krishna says, happen when these contact senses come in contact with the sangata, when there is sangata between the objects and the senses, and how it impacts and how it affects our mind and our buddhi, our whole personality, is the matter of these two verses which we'll discuss in the next class. Okay. So if there are some questions, if there somebody has asked, yeah, any question based on what we discussed? We have still, yeah, some 5 minutes. कुछ है?
Swamiji, can we think of like we are not Kshetra and we are not Kshetran. So right now, like
No,
in
no,
terms of consciousness,
no, we cannot think like that, because Kshetra is there. Now for us, Kshetra is there.
but we are
Whatever knowledge is there, I mean, we are people who believe in knowledge, isn't it? So the people who have knowledge, or whatever is spoken of in the scriptures, in the science books, is made of only 2 things, Kshetra and Kshetrajna. One, the things whatever has been described now, and the other one who will come to the Kshetrajna later on, one who perceives. So without that you cannot think. You can't say there is no Kshetra, no Kshetrajna. You want to do that, you have to have knowledge, isn't it? You're thinking.
Yes.
That is why that you are getting that idea.
Yeah. So I have identified myself with Kshetra right now.
You cannot fully. If you are identified with Kshetra, then if you come to that state, then you feel one with the Paramatma or Purusha or Brahman. Okay, so for that person, the Kshetra vanishes. But that is at the end. Now it is a mixture of Kshetra, Kshetrajna. So that is why he's teaching you both. So Kshetra is there, know what it is. Kshetrajna, he will tell what it is. 2 verses, he will, fifth and sixth, he will tell pleasure, pain, hatred, desire. These are the only things that exist in the world. Patanjali says raga dvesha, abhinivesha, fear. So what is that? Raga means if you divide the whole world, the objects of the world, people of the world into 2. You either like it or you hate it, isn't it? You go towards that which you like, that is desire. You like certain things, so you always go after that. You don't like certain things, you hate certain things, so you always try to avoid it. And that gives like rise to pleasure. If you get what you like, you get pleasure. If you don't get what you like, you get pain. Or if you get what you don't like, then also you get pain. So pleasure, pain, desire, hatred, and sangata, the aggregate, which is neutral, because when you say that I come in touch with water or I jump into water, you have to get wet. Sangata will be there. You can't say I will jump into the water. So all these things and firmness. Firmness, why it is because intelligence itself is not enough. A intelligent person without willpower will not be able to make use of the intelligence. So intelligence tells you don't jump or don't eat this. Okay, you are diabetic, you don't eat this. But if you don't have firmness, that is why Sri Krishna has added this. Willpower is very important. Knowledge is not enough. Yeah, so you can't say that I should not identify with the kshetra. You are already identified. We are helpless. We are already identified. There is a way out of when you separate these two and become one with the kshetragna, then they say you are you become one with pure consciousness or Brahman. But that is the experience which we have to have, not just idea.
Some pure consciousness and reflected consciousness, there, in those terms. So, like those terms, here, one is kshetra, other is kshetra. We have not
Yeah.
identified.
Kshetragna is pure consciousness. Yeah.
So, is there middle term like what we are right now, or is it just Jivatma? So, we have not
No,
identified.
Jivatma, the feeling of Jivatma is because Kshetra and Kshetragna have mixed. So Shankaracharya says in his Advaita, he said, unfortunately, Chaitanya and Jada, they have, as it were, they have mixed. Because of the mixture, we see the Chaitanya as Jada, Jada as Chaitanya. We see there is consciousness in this bird or anything. But the consciousness is not in the bird. Neither it is in its body, nor is it in its prana. Because the same bird, if the prana goes away, where is the external consciousness goes away? So it's borrowed consciousness. As long as the Chaitanya is there, it appears to be conscious. So also the mind at a higher level. So this Chaitanya is something pure consciousness is a very abstract concept now. Now we experience that same consciousness through our body, through our mind, through our ego, through our senses.
In summary, like, इच्छा द्वेष सुखम दुखम संघातश्चेतनाधृति एतत् क्षेत्रं समासेन स्वीकारमुदाहरणं. So
this is in brief, he says.
In brief. So in
with,
first part, it is like summarized, and second,
no, this verse says this fifth and sixth both have to be taken. It's not Ichha Dvesha. Before that, the great elements. What is that verse? Mahabhutani. Mahabhutani, Ahankara, Buddhi, Avyaktam, unmanifest. That is to take care of the causal body. That is unmanifest. You don't know what is potential in you. Whether you are a potential saint or a potential sinner, that is in the Avyakta. So that is also included. The senses, 10 senses and one mind. So that is one part. Second part is Ichha Dvesha. From the mind, from senses, all these things come. Yeah, so what is the question?
Mahabhutanyamkara buddhi. Oh, what is that abhyakt? What is that abhyakt?
Avyaktam, the unmanifested. See, it is the Avyakta, that is why they call Avyakta Prakriti. Prakriti is Avyakta, but when it manifests, it is not very clear what it is. It is not expressed. So unexpressed Prakriti is also Prakriti.
Is it something related to Maya?
No, Maya is the same thing. Maya and Prakriti are the same. But the Maya, that which is seen, that which is unseen, which is hidden or is Avyakta. Avyakta means unmanifest. You see, Prakriti, even before manifesting, it exists, but it doesn't show itself. When it is seen through the mind, through the senses, becomes Vyakta Prakriti. So Avyakta Prakriti is also Prakriti. It has just started. For that, you have to understand the whole science of Bija Mantra. The whole Bija Mantra is an explanation of how Avyakta becomes Vyakta and we become sorrowful And finally, that sorrow is removed when you go back to the Purusha. So that is the whole concept. What we are discussing now, Kshetra, is compressed into one small word, which is the most powerful word in discovered by our each Shakti is represented by Bij mantra. So mantra shastra is compressing whatever you are reading into. You don't even have to understand the meaning. You just repeat, then that avyakta is revealed, and then avyakta what avyakta is, and then how it leads you to the Purusha. So Bija does everything for you. You don't have to study the Kshetra Yoga. But if we want more explanation, if you don't have faith in the mantra, then these things are explained by Sri Krishna. If you go to all the great, that's why they try to compress. Bhagavad Gita was compressed into Brahma Sutras, smaller Yoga Sutras, because they wanted. Can you not explain all these complicated things in one word? Then said, okay, you just have faith, then repeat this bija. What will happen? The bija contains the whole formula. It starts with one alphabet, then another alphabet, then anuswara. Each one represents symbolic representation of this whole prakriti, kshetra. So kshetra, if you compress, it becomes bija, and that leads to om. Om, Bija, and then the deity whom you are worshipping, by whose grace you go back to the uh, Purusha. That is the whole of spiritual life. And Kshetragna you are studying is nothing but expanded explanation of your the mantra shastra. The mantra that you get in mantra shastra is the condensed form of this, the whole Bhagavad Gita, especially this chapter. So how avyakta Bija explains how avyakta leads to misery, and why repeating it you remove misery and go back to Purusha. That's the whole goal of life. That is why he's saying Ichcha, Dvesha, Sukha, Dukkha. These are characteristics. Why do you need to repeat mantra or read this Bhagavad Gita? Because you are misery, because you are pain, you have pain because of the Sangata, and you want to get rid of it. And they have found a solution. Bhagavad Gita has found a solution. Upanishad has found a solution. And the repetition of the mantra is a shortcut and a very condensed way of, but for that you need faith. And the power of the mantra will be revealed, or the whole explanation will come to you in your buddhi as you go on repeating. Then things become clearer and your problems will be solved. So they said, don't you if you don't have time, just focus on mantra sadhana. That is the greatest discovery they made. Even the discovery of Om. That is why Thakur, that's why you should read the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. He gives the essence of Indian scriptures in a very simple language. He says the whole Vedas have merged into Gayatri. Now Gayatri is also a big mantra. That has merged into Om. That means that is the goal you have to attain. Okay? So we'll conclude. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.